asked Amazon, along with other attorneys general, for a state-by-state breakdown of COVID infections among their workers, as well as Whole Foods workers. Why do you want this information, and what do you plan to do with it?
We need to know because this is about public health. Some of the reports that we've heard include reports that Amazon and Whole Foods facilities have some unsafe working conditions. We've also heard reports about delayed reporting because we've got to keep the workers safe, but we've also got to keep the customers safe, and they have a right to know. We need data and we need transparency, and that's why we're asking for it, along with other things.
Now, a top Amazon executive has said, although they have this information, it's not particularly useful and they've refused to provide it. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's ridiculous. Of course it's useful. I mean, everything is about data right now. How many tests we're doing, the contact tracing that we're doing. This is all about data right now. Information is power, and it will help us get resources to where they need to be, and it will also help to stem the spread of the virus in places. Information is power, and everybody should be providing it.
Now, you've asked Amazon for written responses on how they're protecting workers. Meantime, you have workers who are still going to work. What government agency could potentially force Amazon to close facilities or temporarily shut down facilities? And what kind of red flag would precipitate that kind of action?
Well, I think right now, when it comes to working conditions, we're talking about a couple of things. We've heard about a lack of PPE for workers and lack of controls like social distancing. I believe my office can have a role here, and that's why we've gone after Amazon and Whole Foods. I also believe the federal government through OSHA has a role here. But this is really, really serious, and I think that there are avenues. Unfortunately, what I'm looking for, though, is for Amazon and Whole Foods to just step up and agree to these things. Agree right now to provide the PPE and the social distancing. Agree that it will reveal any tests and deaths even, because unfortunately there have been some, to the public. Agree to notify the public when this happens. And finally, agree that they are not going to retaliate against any worker who raises an alarm. Unfortunately, we've seen reports of that where workers have complained and then they've been fired, terminated. That's just wrong. It's also against the law. And we want to make sure finally that these workers have access to unpaid leave for the duration of the crisis. We don't need sick people forced to go to work. We need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect workers as well as customers.
Now, Amazon has repeatedly told us that they're doing everything they can to protect worker safety. Why single out Amazon? There are other large retailers here, Walmart, Target. They're not releasing these numbers. Why should we be picking on Amazon?
Well, I'm just going from the complaints that we've received, okay? And it's certainly the case that Amazon has done more in response to an earlier letter we sent asking for them to adhere to state paid sick time laws. So no doubt Amazon has done more, but Amazon could do even more. And Amazon, Whole Foods, I mean, these are businesses that stand to make boatloads of money through this pandemic. You look at the amount going through Amazon distribution facilities. So we're asking them to use their resources to make sure that they're doing all that they can to protect their workers and to protect public health. And I will certainly take it up with anyone else out there who is engaged in behavior or conduct that we think isn't up to where it needs to be in this time.
You mentioned contact tracing. I wonder how concerned you are about contact tracing and privacy issues, or if you think that those issues take a back seat to a public health crisis.
Well, I think that's probably true, that we've got to prioritize right now public health. I understand that there are real privacy concerns, but I think that we can find a way to protect people's privacy, to confine it to those in public health who need access to that. It's in the interest of public health. These are unusual times. They call for unusual but immediate measures. And I think there's a way for us to do both.
Massachusetts has reported more than 5,000 deaths from COVID-19 so far. And like in many states, there's this tension between the people who think it's not safe to reopen and the people who think the time to reopen is long past. Where do you stand on how and when Massachusetts should reopen?
I know that everyone is anxious to get back to work, to see stores open, to get back outside. But we've got to be really careful here. I mean, Massachusetts has the fourth highest rate of infection in the country, third highest number of deaths. We've got to be really careful about how we do this, because when we reopen, inevitably we're going to see more infections. And again, it's about controlling the rate of infection, because we don't have a vaccine, we don't currently have a treatment. And so we've got to make really smart, strategic decisions. I know it requires patience. And obviously, there's a huge economic issue right now with a lot of people not able to work, businesses not being able to be open. We've got to be careful.
You've also been investigating cybercrimes tied to COVID. What are some of the most egregious things that you're seeing?
Oh, some outrageous behavior. I mean, the federal stimulus money, what we saw is people go online, send emails, send texts to people, pretending to be from the federal government, offering checks and money for a fee, or using it as a way to get people's financial or personal information. We saw a lot of scams around fake coronavirus vaccines or treatments. And we've certainly seen price gouging. I mean, outrageous prices for any number of items, some of it related to sanitizers and masks, some of it related to things like toilet paper. And so, unfortunately, with any crisis, we see people who will use that as a way to exploit vulnerable people. And we've made a really concerted effort in my office to shut that down.
Amazon and eBay, those are some of the companies that have been trying to fight price gouging. What more can your office do to get this under control?
Well, I think it's good to know that a group of us states reached out to the platforms, Amazon, Craigslist, eBay, and asked them to partner with us in monitoring for scams and monitoring for price gouging. They are doing that. We encourage them to do more of that. We're going to need it. And then the public should continue to report things to my office so we can take quick action when we become aware of those issues.
Now, going back to Amazon and the state of big tech, on a related note, various states and the federal government have been looking into the power of big tech companies. From what you've seen so far, do you believe that big tech companies like Amazon, like Facebook, Alphabet, Apple, do these companies need to be broken up?
Well, I think that they really need to be carefully looked at, and I think there do need to be some real policy changes and regulatory changes adopted for these platforms. The fact of the matter is these platforms really control the world. They control our communication flow, our access to financial services, to healthcare, to online learning. They have an incredibly powerful and important role to play in our economy and frankly, all aspects of our lives. With that comes a responsibility. There are responsibilities around data protection and privacy and the misuse of information. We've already taken action and have investigated companies like Facebook for what they did with our data. And my view is the platforms need to be willingly entering into a new understanding of what it means to be a player in this market. Otherwise, they're going to see, I think, significant regulatory action coming their way.
As you mentioned, your office has been involved in actions against Facebook, including their record $5 billion settlement with the FTC. You launched an investigation into their handling of our data when it comes to Cambridge Analytica. How forthcoming and cooperative has Facebook been in working with you?
They haven't been, and we've taken them to court. We've won. They fought us on the production of documents from the very beginning. But again, they were ordered by a court recently to turn over those documents. So, look, I get that historically tech companies have not welcomed government intervention. They'd like to sort of remain apart. But, frankly, Facebook has operated with an arrogance and also in some instances an incompetence that's frankly unacceptable. And it's hurt a lot of people, consumers, our economy. It's put a lot of things at risk. And I really call upon Mark Zuckerberg and the leadership at Facebook to step up, to step forward, recognize the role they play, recognize the responsibility they bear, and do the right thing here for the sake of our economy, for the sake of our country.
Would you say the same thing to Jeff Bezos? Because we've seen other Amazon executives out front in the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've seen less of Jeff Bezos personally. And I wonder, do we need to hear from the CEO?
Well, obviously, my office has been in touch with Amazon, and I've already called out Amazon for some of the problems that we're seeing around worker safety, for example. So, I think everybody needs to step forward here, and certainly our tech CEOs have a major role to play. Some of them have operated in this space and been a force for good. They wield tremendous power. And I just call on all of them to recognize the times that we're in, to recognize that no government actor alone is going to be able to solve the problems of today. We need collaboration and need to be able to work with the business community in a healthy, positive way.
And I'm just curious, last question, how challenging it's been for your office to pursue some of these concerns, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, given that you're talking to us from, I presume, your home right now, your employees are sheltering in place. How challenging has it been to pursue your concerns, and might it make sense to settle with companies like Facebook simply because of the circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely not. I see, our office has been able to operate in a virtual environment. I think, we will never go back to working the way that we used to work, and I think that can be for the good. But right now, I'm focused on very real issues of food insecurity, unemployment, devastation to our small businesses, containing infection and flattening the curve so that our hospitals aren't overburdened. I mean, these are the pressing issues of today, along with the work that has continued traditionally out of an office like mine. So no, now's not the time to fold. Now's the time to make sure that we are getting what we need, and that those who need to be held accountable, COVID or non-COVID related, we're going to continue to do our job as state AGs.